The stars looked different through the viewport of the Liberty's Edge as captain. Jake Morrison watched the massive alien fleet come into view. He had dreamed of this moment since childhood, when humans first detected signals from beyond their solar system. Now, after years of preparation and the longest journey in human history, they were about to meet their galactic neighbors. Amy Collins sat at her communications station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she fine-tuned the translation systems. The young lieutenant had spent months learning the basic structure of Galactic Standard, the language used by the alien coalition that called itself the Galactic Council. Her heart raced as she prepared to make history as the first human to speak. With beings from another world, Dr. Peter Walsh checked his scanning equipment one final time. As the mission's lead scientist, he would be responsible for documenting everything about their new alien friends. His instruments hummed quietly as they analyzed the energy signatures from the 12 different ship designs that made up the welcoming committee. Each vessel was easily 10 times larger than Liberty's Edge, their hulls gleaming with technologies that humanity could barely comprehend. The largest ship dominated the center of the formation. Its sleek design spoke of advanced engineering and centuries of refinement. This was the Zenithia, flagship of the Galactic Council and home to the most powerful beings in known space. Jake felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as he realized that within that massive vessel, alien minds were studying his small human ship with equal curiosity. Ambassador Krell stood in the observation deck of the Zenithia, his reptilian features showing mild amusement as he watched the primitive human vessel approach. The Vorthic Empire had been part of the Galactic Council for over 3,000 years, and in all that time, they had never encountered a species quite so young and naive. Humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, yet here they came, apparently expecting to be welcomed as equals into a civilization that spanned half the galaxy. The ambassador's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of mild entertainment among his people. These humans would need to be educated about their proper place in the galactic order. Like all primitive species, they would be given the choice to submit to guidance protocols or face the consequences of their stubbornness in 3 millennia. No species had ever chosen the latter option after seeing a demonstration of council power. Commander Zeth of the Hegemony's military wing reviewed the tactical displays with practiced efficiency. His people had been warriors for longer than most species had existed, and he could evaluate the threat level of any vessel with a single glance. The human ship posed no danger whatsoever. Its weapons were chemical-based projectiles and primitive energy beams that could barely scratch the paint on a council escort vessel. Their shields were so weak that they might as well not exist. The communication request came through standard channels, transmitted in heavily accented but recognizable Galactic Standard. Amy's voice carried across space, formal and respectful, as she requested permission to come aboard for diplomatic discussions. Her pronunciation was clumsy, like a child learning to speak, but the meaning was clear enough. Ambassador Krell granted the request with the air of an adult indulging a persistent youngster. The humans would dock with the Zenithia's auxiliary bay, where they would be properly received and educated about their future role as servants to the greater galactic community. The process was routine, established through countless first contacts over the millennia. Jake led a small delegation across the docking tube that connected their ship to the alien flagship. Amy accompanied him as translator, while Dr. Walsh brought his portable scanning equipment to document the historic meeting. The artificial gravity felt slightly different aboard the alien vessel, and the air carried strange but not unpleasant scents that spoke of worlds far from Earth. The meeting chamber was vast, designed to accommodate the 12 different species that made up the council. Ambassador Krell towered over the humans, his presence both impressive and intimidating. Other alien representatives observed from elevated platforms, their various forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline to gaseous clouds contained within environmental suits. The formal greetings proceeded according to protocol, with each side exchanging pleasantries and establishing basic diplomatic courtesies. Jake found himself fascinated by the aliens' mannerisms and speech patterns. while Amy worked frantically to keep up with the various dialects and linguistic quirks of each species. Then, Ambassador Krell began explaining the reality of galactic politics. Humanity, he informed them with paternal condescension, would be placed under the protection and guidance of the Council. Earth would be administered by appointed overseers who would help the primitive human species develop into useful contributors to galactic civilization. All major decisions regarding human development would be made by the Council for humanity's own good. Jake felt his stomach drop as the true meaning became clear. They weren't being invited to join the galactic community as equals. They were being told that humanity would become a client species, essentially servants to their alien betters. The captain's training kicked in as he carefully controlled his expression and tone. He politely but firmly explained that humanity valued independence and self-determination. Earth had sent him as a representative, not as a supplicant seeking masters. Humans were willing to learn from more advanced species and contribute to galactic civilization, but they would do so as free beings making their own choices. The alien delegates exchanged what Jake didn't recognize as amused glances. Ambassador Krell's scales shifted to a pattern that indicated tolerant patience with a slow learner. Commander Zeth moved to a tactical console with the casual confidence of someone who had dealt with stubborn primitives many times before, without warning. 3 hegemony warships decloaked around the Liberty's edge, their weapons powered up with an ominous hum that carried through the station's hull. The message was clear: submit now or watch your ship and crew be vaporized as an object lesson in the consequences of defying the Galactic Council. Jake maintained his calm demeanor even as his heart rate spiked. Through the communication link to his ship, he could hear his crew responding to the sudden threat with professional efficiency. Dr. Walsh's instruments began working overtime, scanning not just the alien technology but the aliens themselves with an intensity that none of the Council representatives noticed. Amy watched the alien faces carefully, her training in communication theory allowing her to pick up subtle cues in their expressions and body language. Something about their reactions struck her as oddly predictable, almost rehearsed, as if they had performed this exact scenario countless times before. The tension in the chamber was palpable as both sides waited to see who would blink first. The aliens expected immediate surrender, as was standard when primitive species encountered superior technology. Instead, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before: humans who refused to be intimidated by overwhelming odds. Jake opened a communication channel to his ship, his voice steady and calm as he addressed his crew. Instead of ordering surrender or evacuation, he simply told them to prepare for what he called protocol chaos. The aliens had no way of knowing that this was a contingency plan developed specifically for situations where humanity faced technologically superior but potentially predictable opponents. The first phase of humanity's secret weapon was about to be revealed, though none of the aliens realized it yet. Amy Collins watched the alien faces around the chamber with growing fascination as the standoff continued. Her background in communication theory had taught her to read micro-expressions and body language across different cultures, but what she was seeing here defied her expectations. Each alien species displayed remarkably consistent facial expressions and gestures, as if they were all reading from the same script. The Vorthek ambassador maintained the exact same posture as every other Vorthek she had observed through the ship's sensors. His scale patterns shifted in predictable cycles that seemed to correspond with specific emotional states. Even more interesting, every member of his species aboard the Zenithia showed identical patterns at identical times, as if they were all experiencing the same emotions simultaneously. Dr. Walsh had noticed something similar in his biological scans. The neural activity patterns of the aliens showed far less variation than he would expect from any Earth species. Human brains displayed wild variations in activity levels, processing methods, and response patterns even when performing identical tasks. These alien minds seemed to operate with machine-like consistency across individuals. On the bridge of Liberty's edge, Lieutenant Sam Carter monitored the tactical situation while running background scans on the alien fleet. The weapon systems of the three hegemony warships were impressive, but their positioning and targeting solutions followed textbook patterns that any human military academy student would recognize. There was no creativity or innovation in their approach, just overwhelming firepower applied according to standard doctrine. Commander Zeth grew increasingly frustrated as the minutes passed without human surrender. In his experience, primitive species typically capitulated within moments of witnessing Council military superiority. The fact that these humans continued to maintain calm communications while surrounded by vastly superior firepower was unprecedented. In his career, he decided to escalate the demonstration. With a gesture to his subordinates, he ordered the destruction of a nearby asteroid to showcase the devastating power of hegemony plasma cannons. The massive rock vaporized in a brilliant flash of superheated matter, leaving nothing but glowing particles drifting in space. Captain Morrison's response left the aliens speechless. Instead of the expected terror and immediate surrender, he thanked them politely for the demonstration and requested detailed technical specifications of their weapon systems. He claimed scientific curiosity and expressed hope that such impressive technology might someday be shared for the betterment of both species. Ambassador Krell's scales shifted to patterns indicating confusion and mild alarm. No species in recorded history had responded to a show of force by asking for technical details. The human captain's apparent lack of fear was so far outside normal parameters that the ambassador found himself consulting his cultural database for precedents that simply didn't exist. Back aboard the human vessel, Dr. Walsh was making remarkable discoveries about alien psychology. His scans revealed that each species possessed remarkably uniform brain structures within their populations. Where human individuals showed massive variations in neural pathways, creative centers, and problem-solving approaches, these aliens displayed almost identical mental architectures. Amy had reached similar conclusions through linguistic analysis. The alien languages followed rigid, grammatical structures with very limited vocabulary for expressing individual thoughts or creative concepts. Their communications patterns were so predictable that she could anticipate responses several exchanges in advance. It was as if each species had developed language not for individual expression, but for efficient information transfer within a collective consciousness. The breakthrough came when Dr. Walsh correlated his biological data with Amy's linguistic observations. These species had achieved their advanced civilizations through collective thinking and rigid social hierarchies, but at the cost of individual creativity and adaptability. Each alien thought almost identically to others of their kind, making their societies incredibly stable but also completely predictable. Captain Morrison quietly reviewed the accumulating data while maintaining diplomatic discussions with increasingly confused alien representatives. The evidence pointed to a stunning conclusion. Humanity was facing species that had traded innovation for stability, creativity for order, and individual thought for collective efficiency. They were technologically superior but mentally rigid in ways that created exploitable weaknesses. He activated Protocol Chaos, a contingency plan developed by human strategists who had theorized about exactly this type of scenario. The protocol was based on the assumption that any sufficiently advanced alien civilization might have eliminated the random factors and creative chaos that drove human innovation. If such species existed, their predictability could be turned against them. The first phase involved subtle, psychological probing disguised as continued diplomatic discourse. Morrison began asking personal questions about alien family structures, childhood experiences, and individual aspirations. The aliens found these queries bizarre and irrelevant to diplomatic negotiations, but their confused responses provided valuable psychological intelligence. Commander Zeth attempted to answer questions about his upbringing, but quickly realized he had no individual experiences that differed meaningfully from any other member of his species. His childhood, education, and career path had followed predetermined patterns identical to millions of others. The concept of personal dreams or individual goals was so foreign that he struggled to understand what the human was asking. Dr. Walsh noticed immediate stress responses in the alien neural patterns when they were asked to think about concepts. outside their normal parameters. Their brains literally struggled to process truly individual thoughts or creative ideas. The rigid mental structures that made them efficient also made them vulnerable to cognitive overload when faced with unpredictable stimuli. Amy began implementing the second phase of protocol chaos by introducing random elements into the communication patterns. She started punctuating serious diplomatic discussions with seemingly irrelevant observations about the beauty of distant stars, or questions about alien recreational activities. The aliens found these interruptions deeply disturbing because they couldn't categorize them within their established communication protocols. The psychological warfare escalated when she began broadcasting human music across all communication frequencies. The concept of sound organized purely for emotional rather than informational purposes was completely alien to species that had eliminated individual artistic expression from their cultures. Several alien crew members actually stopped their duties to listen, displaying behavior their commanders had never witnessed. Lieutenant Carter contributed to the chaos by asking tactical questions that had no logical answers. He inquired about the aliens' favorite colors for spaceship hulls, their preferred geometric shapes for weapon arrays, and whether they ever felt lonely during long space voyages. These seemingly innocent questions caused minor system failures aboard several alien vessels as their crews struggled to process queries that fell outside all established categories. Ambassador Krell found himself in the unprecedented position of being unable to predict or control a diplomatic situation. His species had developed complex protocols for every conceivable scenario involving primitive civilizations, but none of their procedures addressed contact with a species that asked about feelings, played music during serious negotiations, and responded to threats with genuine curiosity about weapons technology. The aliens began to realize that something fundamental about their understanding of galactic civilization was being challenged by these strange humans. They had built their entire society on the assumption that intelligence naturally evolved toward order, predictability, and collective thinking. The possibility that a species could achieve spaceflight while maintaining individual creativity and chaotic thought patterns had never been seriously considered. Captain Morrison watched the growing confusion among the alien representatives with satisfaction. Phase 1 of humanity's secret weapon was working perfectly. They had identified the fundamental weakness of their technologically superior opponents, an inability to handle true unpredictability. The species that had seemed impossibly advanced were beginning to show cracks in their collective confidence when faced with the one thing their ordered minds couldn't process. The stage was set for the next phase of the protocol, where humanity would demonstrate that in a galaxy of predictable civilizations, chaos itself could become the ultimate tactical advantage. The ultimatum came through official channels with all the ceremonial weight that the Galactic Council could muster. Ambassador Krell's voice carried the authority of 3 millennia of galactic dominance as he delivered the standard terms. Humanity had 1 solar hour to surrender unconditionally or face complete annihilation. The message was transmitted with absolute confidence, as this intimidation tactic had never failed in recorded history. Captain Morrison listened to the ultimatum with the calm attention of someone receiving weather reports. When the transmission ended, he opened a direct communication channel to Commander Zeth and began asking about the alien military leader's childhood experiences. The question was so unexpected and seemingly irrelevant that Zeth found himself answering before his tactical training could override the social impulse to respond to direct queries. Amy Collins recorded every detail of the exchange while monitoring the stress patterns in the alien commander's voice. She had discovered that the aliens possessed no cultural framework for distinguishing between formal military communications and casual personal conversation. Their rigid social structures meant that a direct question from an authority figure demanded an immediate and honest response, regardless of the tactical situation. Dar Walsh observed the biological responses of the alien crews through his long-range sensors as Captain Morrison continued his unprecedented approach to military diplomacy. The aliens' neural activity showed increasing agitation as they struggled to categorize behavior that fell outside every established protocol. Their collective minds were designed for efficiency and predictability, making them vulnerable to cognitive disruption when faced with truly random inputs. The conversation took an even more surreal turn when Morrison began asking Commander Zeth about his personal dreams and aspirations. The alien warrior found himself in the impossible position of trying to explain concepts that simply didn't exist within his species' worldview. Individual dreams were a foreign concept to beings who had been bred for collective thinking and predetermined social roles. Lieutenant Sam Carter contributed to the psychological assault by suggesting they play a human game called 20 Questions during the standoff. The concept of recreational activity during a military confrontation was so alien to the hegemony crews that several tactical officers actually requested clarification from their superiors about proper response protocols. The aliens had procedures for every conceivable combat scenario, but nothing in their extensive military manuals addressed enemies who wanted to play games. The situation deteriorated further for the aliens when Amy began broadcasting human music across all communication frequencies. She started with classical compositions that emphasized mathematical harmony, then shifted to jazz improvisation that showcased the human ability to create beauty from controlled chaos. The alien crews found themselves experiencing emotional responses to organized sound patterns, a phenomenon their species had eliminated from their culture thousands of years ago. Several Vorthak technicians aboard the Zenithia actually stopped their routine duties to listen to the strange human melodies. Their supervisors watched in horror as disciplined crew members began displaying individual preferences for different musical styles. Some preferred the structured complexity of symphonic arrangements, while others responded more strongly to the unpredictable variations of improvisational pieces. Ambassador Krell faced his first crisis of leadership in centuries as his perfectly ordered crew began showing signs of individual personality development. The exposure to human creativity was causing unexpected neural pathways to activate in alien brains that had been optimized for collective thinking. The biological changes were subtle but measurable, and they terrified the alien leadership. Dr. Walsh made a crucial discovery during this phase of the psychological warfare. His scans revealed that prolonged exposure to unpredictable stimuli was actually causing positive neuroplasticity in the alien brains. The rigid mental structures that had made their species so efficient were beginning to develop new pathways for creative thinking and individual expression. The implications were staggering. These ancient civilizations had achieved technological supremacy by eliminating the chaotic elements that drove innovation, but they had also eliminated their capacity for growth and adaptation. Humans represented not just a military threat, but an evolutionary catalyst that could transform alien societies in ways that their leaders found more terrifying than any weapon. Captain Morrison escalated the psychological pressure by beginning to predict alien responses several exchanges in advance. Using the behavioral patterns his crew had identified, he essentially scripted conversations with alien commanders, who found themselves saying exactly what the human captain expected them to say. The demonstration of predictability was more demoralizing than any show of superior firepower could have been. The aliens realized with growing horror that their supposed tactical advantage was based entirely on their opponents following logical, predictable response patterns against an enemy who operated according to creative chaos rather than established protocols. Their overwhelming technological superiority became largely irrelevant. Commander Zeth experienced something unprecedented in his military career: uncertainty about the outcome of a conflict. His species had conquered dozens of worlds and defeated hundreds of enemy fleets, but always against opponents who fought according to recognizable tactical principles. These humans seemed to have no consistent strategy at all, making them impossible to counter using conventional military doctrine. The breaking point came when Morrison suggested they resolve the entire conflict through what he called a contest of creative problem-solving rather than military action. The proposal was so illogical from a strategic standpoint that it caused actual system failures aboard several alien vessels as their computers, attempted to analyze the tactical implications of voluntary non-combat resolution. Ambassador Krell found himself in consultation with emergency psychological advisors as his crew struggled to maintain basic operational efficiency. The human influence was spreading through his ship like a virus, causing individual crew members to begin questioning established procedures and suggesting alternative approaches to routine tasks. The concept of individual initiative was so foreign to Vorthic culture that their social systems had no mechanisms for handling it. Amy observed the chaos spreading through the alien fleet with fascination and growing confidence. The humans had discovered that their greatest weakness compared to galactic civilization was actually their greatest strength. The creativity, unpredictability, and individual variation that made humans seem primitive to alien observers were the exact qualities that could disrupt civilizations built on rigid order and collective thinking. Dr. Walsh documented the progressive breakdown of alien military efficiency as exposure to human unpredictability continued. What had started as a routine intimidation of a primitive species was evolving into an existential crisis for civilizations that had forgotten how to adapt to unexpected challenges. The aliens faced an impossible choice: destroy the humans immediately, to prevent further psychological contamination of their crews, or try to understand and contain a force that threatened the very foundation of their ordered society. Either option carried risks that their predictable minds struggled to evaluate. Captain Morrison watched the confusion spreading through the enemy fleet and prepared to implement the next phase of humanity's secret weapon. The aliens had revealed their fundamental weakness, and now it was time to demonstrate that in a galaxy where everyone thought alike, the ability to think differently was the ultimate tactical advantage. The contest he had proposed would give humanity the opportunity to showcase human creativity against alien logic, unpredictability against rigid thinking, and individual innovation against collective stagnation. The outcome would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. The Galactic Council agreed to Morrison's challenge with the reluctant desperation of beings who had lost control of a situation they had never encountered before. Their military commanders were experiencing analysis paralysis as they tried to predict the behavior of enemies who seemed to operate without any logical framework. The contest would demonstrate human inferiority through scientific methods, restoring proper order to what had become an incomprehensible situation. Ambassador Krell announced the terms with forced confidence. 3 tests would prove conclusively that human thinking was inferior to the collective intelligence that had built galactic civilization. The first challenge involved solving complex quantum mechanical equations that required computational power far beyond anything a primitive species could possess. The aliens expected easy victory through mathematical superiority. Dr. Walsh approached the quantum equation with the casual interest of someone examining an interesting puzzle rather than facing a test that would determine his species' fate. The problem was designed to require massive computational resources and rigid adherence to established mathematical principles. Instead of following the expected approach, he began making intuitive leaps and creative approximations that horrified the alien observers. The mathematical purists among the Council watched in dismay as Walsh ignored entire branches of the calculation tree, replacing complex computations with educated guesses and creative shortcuts. His final answer was reached in less than a quarter of the time required by proper methodology, and while not precisely accurate to 17 decimal places, it was functionally correct for any practical application. Commander Zeth struggled to understand how an imperfect solution could be considered acceptable, let alone superior. His species had spent millennia refining their mathematical techniques to achieve absolute precision in all calculations. The concept that approximate answers could be more valuable than exact ones challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence and problem solving. The second test focused on tactical planning using a standard military scenario with a predetermined optimal solution. The aliens presented a situation involving the capture of a fortified position using limited resources against superior defensive forces. Every galactic military academy taught the same approach to this classic problem, and the solution had been refined through thousands of simulations. Lieutenant Carter analyzed the scenario with the practiced eye of someone trained in human military doctrine. He ignored the conventional wisdom entirely and proposed a strategy based on misdirection, psychological manipulation, and calculated risks that would be considered reckless by any standard military assessment. His plan relied on unpredictable human behavior rather than superior firepower or tactical positioning. When the aliens ran Carter's strategy through their combat simulators, the results were disturbing. The unconventional human approach succeeded, where their optimal tactics failed, but only because it exploited the predictable response patterns of the defending forces. The alien commanders realized that their tactical superiority only worked against enemies who followed logical decision-making processes. The implications sent shockwaves through the military leadership. Their entire strategic doctrine was based on the assumption that all intelligent species would respond rationally to given stimuli. Against an opponent who deliberately chose irrational responses for tactical advantage, their centuries of military refinement became meaningless. The third test proved most unsettling to the alien observers. They challenged the humans to create something beautiful, expecting primitive art that would demonstrate the superiority of collective aesthetic principles over individual expression. The aliens had eliminated personal creativity from their cultures, replacing it with mathematically optimized beauty standards that served societal functions. Amy Collins responded by composing an impromptu song that combined mathematical precision with emotional expression in ways that defied every established principle of alien aesthetics. Her melody incorporated prime number sequences as rhythmic elements while using harmonic progressions that triggered unexpected neural responses in alien listeners. The composition was simultaneously logical and chaotic, structured and spontaneous. The effect on the alien audience was immediate and terrifying to their leaders. Several council members reported experiencing what they could only describe as pleasant neural disruption, a sensation they had never encountered before. Their optimized brains, designed for efficiency and order, were responding positively to chaotic inputs that should have caused cognitive stress. Dr. Walsh documented the neurological changes occurring in real time as alien brains rewired themselves in response to human creative expression. The rigid mental pathways that had made these species so collectively intelligent were developing new connections that allowed for individual thought and emotional response. The biological transformation was subtle but irreversible. Ambassador Krell faced the horrifying realization that human creativity was literally infectious. Extended exposure to chaotic inputs was causing permanent changes in alien neural architecture, making individuals within collective species begin to think independently. The ordered society that had maintained galactic peace for millennia was being transformed by the mere presence of human influence. The contest results forced the Council into emergency deliberations as they struggled to interpret outcomes that fell outside every established framework. The humans had succeeded not by demonstrating superior capabilities, but by revealing that the entire foundation of galactic civilization was built on false assumptions about the nature of intelligence and progress. Captain Morrison watched the alien leadership grapple with concepts that challenged their most basic beliefs about society and evolution. The contest had proven that human unpredictability wasn't a sign of primitive chaos, but a sophisticated adaptation that allowed for innovation and growth in ways that collective thinking could never achieve. The mathematical test had shown that practical solutions were often more valuable than theoretical perfection. The tactical simulation revealed that unpredictable strategies could defeat superior forces by exploiting the limitations of rigid thinking. The creative challenge demonstrated that individual expression could enhance collective intelligence, rather than diminishing it. Commander Zeth found himself questioning military doctrines that had remained unchanged for centuries. The human approach to problem-solving opened possibilities that his species had never considered, suggesting that their technological supremacy might be masking fundamental strategic weaknesses. The implications for galactic military balance were staggering. Amy observed the growing turmoil among alien crew members as they struggled to process new ideas and individual thoughts triggered by exposure to human creativity. Some aliens seemed to be enjoying the experience of independent thinking, while others appeared terrified by the loss of collective certainty that had previously guided their entire existence. Dr. Walsh realized that the contest had revealed humanity's true secret weapon, the ability to catalyze evolutionary change in stagnant civilizations. Humans weren't just different from other galactic species. They were the key to unlocking potential that had been suppressed by thousands of years of collective optimization and social rigidity. The Council faced an impossible decision as they contemplated the contest results. They could declare humanity the winner and accept the revolutionary changes that human influence would bring to galactic civilization, or they could reject the entire premise of the challenge and resort to military force to eliminate the existential threat that human creativity represented. Either choice would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy, but for completely different reasons. Victory would make humans partners in reshaping galactic society, while defeat would require the complete elimination of a species whose very existence challenged the foundations of established order. Captain Morrison prepared for the final phase of the confrontation, knowing that the aliens now understood exactly what humanity represented. Not conquerors seeking to dominate the galaxy, but evolutionary catalysts capable of transforming ancient civilizations in ways that their rigid leaders found more terrifying than any military threat. The Council's decision came with all the weight of galactic authority behind it. Ambassador Krell delivered the verdict with forced dignity, declaring that humanity was too unpredictable and chaotic to be safely integrated into civilized galactic society. Earth would be placed under permanent quarantine, with humanity confined to their solar system under strict council supervision to prevent their disruptive influence from spreading to other worlds. Captain Morrison received the judgment with the same calm demeanor he had maintained throughout the entire encounter. His response, delivered in measured tones that carried clearly across all communication channels, sent shockwaves through every alien vessel in the fleet. He thanked the Council for their decision and politely informed them that the contest had never been about proving human worth or gaining acceptance into galactic civilization. The true purpose of every interaction, every test, every moment of apparent cooperation had been intelligence gathering on an unprecedented scale. Humanity had systematically analyzed and categorized the psychological, biological, and behavioral characteristics of 12 different alien species, while their supposed judges evaluated human capabilities. The students had been studying their teachers while pretending to take their examinations. Dr. Walsh stepped forward to present his complete analysis, the culmination of intensive observation disguised as scientific curiosity. His findings were devastating in their implications. The 12 species that dominated galactic civilization were evolutionary dead ends. Ancient races that had achieved stability and technological advancement by eliminating the very characteristics that allowed for continued growth and adaptation. Each species had reached a plateau thousands of years ago, after which their development had stagnated into mere refinement of existing knowledge rather than genuine innovation. Their collective intelligence had become a prison that prevented individual creativity and original thinking. They were living fossils, impressive in their achievements but incapable of fundamental change or growth. Amy revealed the linguistic evidence that supported these conclusions. Every alien language had become increasingly rigid over the millennia, with new words and concepts being added at rates far slower than natural linguistic evolution required. The aliens were literally thinking themselves into extinction through excessive standardization of thought and communication. The Council members listened in growing horror as their most fundamental assumptions about civilization and progress were systematically dismantled by the primitive species they had sought to dominate. The humans presented evidence that galactic society was in terminal decline, maintained only by technological momentum from innovations that had ceased centuries ago. Lieutenant Carter delivered the military analysis that completed the picture. Using the behavioral patterns they had observed, he had conducted theoretical assessments of every major galactic conflict from the past millennium. Human strategic thinking could have resolved each war in a fraction of the time with minimal casualties, because alien military doctrine was based on overwhelming force rather than creative problem-solving. The tactical implications were staggering. Galactic military supremacy was built on technological superiority rather than strategic innovation. Against an opponent who thought creatively rather than following established patterns, even the most advanced alien weapons became largely irrelevant. Superior firepower meant nothing if it could not be deployed effectively against unpredictable targets. Captain Morrison then demonstrated the most terrifying aspect of human intelligence. Using the psychological profiles his crew had assembled, he began predicting alien responses with startling accuracy. He scripted entire conversations with council members, anticipating their reactions several exchanges in advance, and proving that their supposedly superior minds operated according to patterns so rigid that they were essentially mechanical. Commander Zeth experienced the humiliation of having his responses predicted word for word by a member of what he had considered a primitive species. The human captain knew exactly how he would react to specific stimuli, what arguments would persuade him, and what threats would cause him to escalate or retreat. The psychological dominance was more complete than any military victory could have achieved. Ambassador Krell found himself trapped in conversations where every response he made had been anticipated and prepared for in advance. The humans had reverse-engineered his entire species' decision-making process, reducing thousands of years of cultural development to predictable algorithms that could be manipulated by anyone who understood the underlying patterns. The revelation that followed struck at the heart of galactic civilization's greatest fears. Dr. Walsh presented biological evidence that several council species were experiencing population decline and genetic homogenization that would lead to extinction within a few millennia. Their social systems had eliminated the diversity and individual variation necessary for long-term species survival. The aliens had traded evolutionary adaptability for social stability, creating civilizations that were impressive but ultimately doomed. Their collective intelligence had become collective stupidity, preventing the kind of creative problem-solving that could address existential challenges. They were dying as civilizations while believing themselves to be at the peak of development. Captain Morrison's final revelation completed the psychological devastation. Humanity didn't want to conquer the galaxy or destroy alien civilizations. They wanted to help solve the stagnation problems that threatened to end galactic civilization entirely. The offer to share human unpredictability and creativity was genuine, born from recognition that diversity strengthened rather than weakened intelligent societies. The prospect terrified the alien leadership more than any military threat could have. Conquest could be resisted through superior technology and overwhelming force, but voluntary cultural exchange would inevitably transform their ordered societies in ways that their rigid minds could not predict or control. The humans were offering to save galactic civilization by fundamentally changing it. Amy watched the psychological impact of these revelations spread through the alien crews like a virus of individual thought. Some council members were beginning to see the logic in human arguments, while others retreated further into rigid adherence to established protocols. The unity that had defined galactic civilization for millennia was fracturing under the pressure of new ideas. Dr. Walsh documented the real-time neurological changes occurring in alien brains as they struggled to process concepts that challenged their most basic assumptions. The exposure to human thinking was catalyzing evolutionary changes that had been suppressed for thousands of years, awakening dormant capacities for creativity and individual expression. The Council faced the most difficult decision in their recorded history. They could eliminate humanity immediately to prevent further contamination of their ordered society, but lose the solution to their civilization's terminal stagnation. Alternatively, they could accept human influence and risk the complete transformation of everything they had built over the millennia. Commander Zeth made a startling admission that shocked his colleagues. His species had been experiencing declining birth rates and technological stagnation for centuries, problems that their leadership had been hiding from the general population. The brief exposure to human unpredictability had already sparked more innovation among his crews than they had seen in decades. The terrible truth was now fully revealed. Humanity represented either the salvation or the destruction of galactic civilization, depending entirely on how the ancient species chose to respond to the challenge of change. The primitive upstarts from Earth had become the most powerful force in the galaxy, not through superior technology or military might, but through the simple ability to think new thoughts and imagine different possibilities. The stage was set for a decision that would reshape the entire galaxy, as 12 ancient civilizations confronted the reality that their greatest achievement might also be their ultimate downfall. The debate that followed among the council members was unlike anything in their recorded history. For the first time in millennia, representatives of the 12 species found themselves fundamentally disagreeing about a course of action. The unity that had defined galactic civilization was cracking under the pressure of choosing between extinction through stagnation or transformation through chaos. War Marshal Dizes led the faction demanding immediate human elimination. His argument was simple and terrifying in its logic. Humanity represented an existential threat to ordered civilization that could not be contained or controlled. Every moment of continued contact would spread the infection of individual thinking further through galactic society, ultimately destroying the collective intelligence that had brought peace and prosperity to countless worlds. Commander Zeth found himself in the unprecedented position of publicly disagreeing with his military superiors. The hegemony officer made a confession that shocked the council. His own species had been hiding evidence of population decline and technological stagnation for over 2 centuries. Their rigid social systems had eliminated the genetic and cultural diversity necessary for continued evolution and growth. The admission opened floodgates of similar revelations. Representatives from 6 different species acknowledged declining birth rates, increasing genetic homogenization, and technological development that had effectively ceased generations ago. The galactic civilization that appeared mighty and eternal was actually dying slowly, maintained only by the momentum of past achievements. Dr. Walsh presented the biological evidence that made the crisis undeniable. Genetic analysis of the alien crews showed diversity levels that were approaching critical thresholds below which species viability could not be maintained. The collective breeding programs and social optimization that had created galactic stability were also driving multiple civilizations toward extinction. Ambassador Krell faced a personal crisis that mirrored the larger galactic dilemma, his own. Species' rigid caste system had prevented the social mobility and individual expression that drove innovation and adaptation. For the first time in his existence, he found himself questioning whether the order that had defined his civilization was actually a slow form of suicide disguised as progress. Amy Collins observed the fracturing unity of the council with fascination. The aliens were experiencing something their species had not encountered in thousands of years. Genuine disagreement about fundamental principles. The collective decision-making processes that had governed galactic civilization were breaking down as individual council members began expressing personal opinions rather than species consensus. The breakthrough came when a junior representative from the Crystalline Consortium made an unprecedented request. Against all established protocols, she asked to speak privately with the human delegation, expressing curiosity about individual creativity and personal expression that her species had eliminated from their culture centuries ago. Captain Morrison seized the opportunity to demonstrate humanity's proposed solution. Rather than demanding immediate transformation of alien societies, he suggested a carefully controlled cultural exchange program. Small numbers of volunteer human advisors would work with willing alien civilizations to introduce measured amounts of unpredictability and creative thinking. The proposal was radical but carefully designed to address alien fears about uncontrolled chaos. Human influence would be introduced gradually in limited quantities, with constant monitoring to ensure that beneficial changes could be preserved while preventing social collapse. The goal was evolution rather than revolution, adaptation rather than destruction. Dr. Walsh explained the scientific basis for the approach. Biological systems required controlled stress to maintain health and adaptability. Galactic civilization had eliminated all sources of creative pressure, resulting in evolutionary stagnation. Humanity could provide the missing element that would revitalize ancient species without overwhelming their social structures. The debate continued for hours as council members struggled with concepts that challenged their most fundamental beliefs about civilization and progress. Some representatives began privately admitting that their species had lost the ability to solve new problems or adapt to changing circumstances. Others remained convinced that order and predictability were essential for galactic stability. Lieutenant Carter made the argument that finally swayed the moderate faction. He pointed out that the alternative to controlled change was uncontrolled extinction. The galactic civilization could choose to risk transformation through human influence or accept certain death through continued stagnation. Evolution or extinction were the only options available. The compromise that emerged reshaped galactic politics in ways that none of the participants fully understood. Humanity would be granted limited membership in the Galactic Council, but with a unique role that had never existed before. They would become the galaxy's designated agents of controlled chaos, responsible for introducing calculated unpredictability to civilizations that requested assistance. The first volunteers were identified immediately. 3 species acknowledged that they needed human help to address critical problems that their collective intelligence could not solve. Population decline, technological stagnation, and social rigidity had brought them to the brink of civilizational collapse, making the risks of human influence acceptable compared to certain extinction. Captain Morrison accepted the role with the understanding that humanity was embarking on the most important mission in their species' history. They would help revitalize galactic civilization by teaching ancient species how to think creatively again, how to embrace individual expression, and how to adapt to change rather than resist it. Amy Collins was selected to lead the first cultural exchange mission, tasked with introducing concepts of individual artistic expression to a species that had not produced original art in over a millennium. Her assignment would serve as a test case for whether controlled cultural chaos could revitalize stagnant civilizations without destroying them. Dr. Walsh would work with alien biological researchers to understand how genetic and cultural diversity could be reintroduced to species that had homogenized themselves nearly to extinction. His research would determine whether the evolutionary damage caused by excessive order could be reversed through careful intervention. The final scene showed the Liberty's Edge departing with a mixed crew of humans and volunteer aliens, heading toward their first assignment. The Crystalline Consortium had requested help in addressing a crisis that their collective intelligence could not solve, making them the test case for humanity's new role in galactic civilization. Captain Morrison's final log entry reflected on the unprecedented nature of their situation. Humanity had found their place in the galaxy not as conquerors, servants, or even equals, but as catalysts for evolutionary change. They would either save galactic civilization by transforming it, or watch it collapse under the weight of its own perfectionism. The other council species watched the departure with mixed emotions. Some saw hope for the first time in centuries, recognizing that human influence might solve problems their species had been unable to address. Others viewed the mission with deep concern, understanding that success would fundamentally alter the balance of power and philosophy that had governed the galaxy for millennia. The story concluded with the recognition that humanity's secret weapon had been revealed, not as superior technology or military might, but as the ability to think differently in a universe where everyone else thought alike. In a galaxy of predictable order, the power to introduce beneficial chaos had become the ultimate strategic advantage. The age of collective stagnation was ending, replaced by an era where controlled creativity and managed unpredictability would determine which civilizations thrived and which became extinct. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had inherited the responsibility for its continued evolution and survival. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in thousands of years, that was exactly what it needed to survive.